movie opens up with a man named Mark Jarvis talking about resurrection. He says that being resurrected feels like coming out of your mother's womb, totally conscious and aware of everything around you. The scene then cuts to a state-of-the-art facility called the Prodigy. It is the year 2084. The facility is headed by Dr. Victor West, who specializes in regenerative medicine. West's institute claims that immortality is achievable through their world's most advanced regeneration program, Lazarus. A nurse named Elizabeth Monsfra arrives at the institute for her first day at work. Elizabeth is an admirer of Dr. West, and he gives her a brief tour of the facility while telling her about the Lazarus program. The Prodigy team has been working on the project for more than 4 years, and they're finally prepared to face reanimation. Elizabeth has 4 weeks to prepare herself for the big surgery, which will bring a subject back to life. After the surgery, the subject would remain in an induced coma for 2 months, while its body assimilates to its new organs and implants. Elizabeth is supposed to help the subject make that transition into its new life. The movie then flashes back to 2015. Mark Jarvis has been diagnosed with inoperable throat cancer and has about a year to live. Naturally, he's shaken by the diagnosis, but he gathers all his strength to inform his loved ones and coworkers. The news devastates Mark's girlfriend Naomi, but she promises to be right by his side till the very end. However, it's later revealed that Mark hasn't given up on his life yet, and at a dinner, he tells his friends about a process called cryonisation, which may help one resurrect. In this process, Mark's body would be put in a capsule filled with liquid nitrogen in hopes that someday medicine might be able to cure his cancer and he can be brought back to life. This expectedly raises eyebrows amongst his friends, but after a lot of explaining, they get on board with the idea and vow to support him through the procedure. The scene cuts to the present when Mark's body is reconstructed and finally brought back to life at Prodigy. After waking up from a coma-induced state, Mark is greeted by Dr. West and his team. However, Mark quickly loses consciousness. Later, when he wakes up, he's shown a mirror, revealing his bald head and frail body. When asked if he remembers anything, he reveals that the only thing he recalls is fear before passing out again. In the background, Mark continues to narrate his story. He's the first man ever to be resurrected. In his current form, he's made up of 20% remains of vital organs and tissues recovered from his old body, mainly the brain and the central nervous system. 65% clones bones, muscle, skin, nerve endings, and other organ remains. 10% bionic implants, which reinforces his muscular, skeletal system, and sensory organs. 5% internal technology designed to regulate and monitor the correct functioning of the organism. On top of that, a detachable umbilical cord connects him to his new mechanical mother. After his reanimation, the team at Prodigy face innumerable problems whose respective solutions have been more surgery, organ removal, induced coma, and external control of vital signs. They administer narcotics to prevent adverse reactions, more narcotics to ease the effects of those narcotics, and so on and so on. All this has resulted in a terribly fragile organism, permanently at the edge of collapse, just the way one is when they're born. However, Mark couldn't be more excited about another shot at life, and gradually he becomes more stable. In no time, he also learns to walk again. Soon, Mark becomes curious about life outside the facility, but Dr. West assures him that nothing much has changed. However, Dr. West then introduces him to a revolutionary technology called the Mind Writer, which allows people to record their thoughts. This would help Dr. West and his team learn about the thoughts in Mark's head. When Mark puts on the device, an array of memories flash before his eyes. He wonders if the person in his memories is really him. Later in the day, when Elizabeth gives Mark a routine dry bath, he strikes up a conversation with her and tries to hit on her. Elizabeth then reveals that in the current world, the concept of romantic love has disappeared, and he can directly ask her for intercourse, much to Mark's shock. That night, Mark tries to walk by himself. He partially succeeds, but when he looks at the mirror, he sees an older version of himself and collapses to the ground. As Mark's past memories flash before his eyes again, he tries to drag himself towards his mechanical mother, but without success. Fortunately, Elizabeth arrives and rescues him. However, Mark begins to lose his memories. After an extensive medical examination, Dr. West reveals that the cells of a certain part of Mark's brain are deteriorating, which is causing his memory loss. Dr. West also reveals that there's no cure for the problem, much to Mark's dismay. However, Dr. Sarah assures him that memory loss is no longer considered a serious problem thanks to Mindwriter. But due to his condition, Mark may never live an autonomous life again. These developments upset Mark, so to cheer him up, Dr. West and others celebrate the 100th day after Mark's resurrection with a cake. He also receives a box which he had arranged in the past for his future self to get. It contains his cherished possessions, including a letter from Naomi. A flashback to Mark's high school days when he first met Naomi reveals that they have a very complicated history. It turns out Naomi was in a relationship when she first started fooling around with Mark. Naomi and Mark were set to get married when the latter was diagnosed with cancer. Back to the present, Mark reads the letter. Lo and behold, it's revealed that after his death, unable to live by herself, Naomi decided to get herself cryogenized at the age of 50, hoping to reunite with him in the future. Mark then visits a chamber where Naomi and other cryogenized individuals have been kept. It's revealed that due to the expenses involved in the process and Naomi's feeble condition owing to her age, she can't be reanimated. Stricken with grief, Mark decides to shave the hair he had grown since his reanimation. In the next scene, still hung up on Naomi's reanimation, Mark asks Elizabeth about the resurrection trials and the possibility of her reanimation. However, Elizabeth tells him that she has no idea about it because she's relatively new at the facility. Seeing him upset, she comforts him, assuring him that someday Prodigy will remove all the obstacles in the path of Naomi's reanimation and he will reunite with her. Nevertheless, Mark becomes more detached, and Dr. West and others soon learn that he has developed anxiety. Elizabeth suggests taking Mark out of his current hospital environment. However, Dr. West opposes the idea because of the already prevalent negative conjecture in the media and public about their experiments. He callously suggests that Mark should shoulder the consequences of choosing to come back to life, much to Elizabeth's discontentment. Afterwards, Elizabeth goes to Mark's room and tells him that she's been given permission to have intercourse with him. She gives him Viagra and they start to make love. However, he is unable to continue as he's still upset about Naomi. Later, Mark sneaks out of his room and steals Dr. West's Mindwriter memories to get an insight of previous Lazarus trials. To his horror, Mark sees memory after memory of failed, gory reanimation attempts. The movie then cuts to the day when Mark is introduced to the outside world. Dr. West announces Mark as the first person to be resurrected to a round of roaring applause from the audience. On the stage, Dr. West surprises Mark by announcing that Prodigy has decided to resurrect Naomi next. However, Mark isn't pleased after having seen the many failed and bloody reanimation attempts. Later, he confronts Dr. West and calls him a monster for what he put other cryogenized individuals through. Dr. West defends himself, saying he had to take those drastic steps to come as far as they've come with the Lazarus program. Aware that Mark may expose the recordings, Dr. West makes an appeal to Mark, saying that if he sabotages the project, humanity may never get to reap its benefit. The movie then flashes back to Mark's funeral party, which he had thrown for his loved ones before he was cryogenized. Soon, Naomi arrives and she hugs him. Despite being apprehensive about the whole thing, she tells him that she wants to be by his side during the procedure. This makes Mark both emotional and sad as he dances his heart out with Naomi. Back to the present, Mark makes his way to Naomi's cryogenization chamber to see her. Elizabeth eventually finds him and checks up on him. When she asks him about Naomi's reanimation, he states that he doesn't want her to be reanimated because he doesn't want to see Naomi suffer. He then tells her about the day he ended himself for the procedure. He says that in his final moments, he realized that the last few months were some of the best days of his life, squeezing every drop of each moment in a way he has never done before. In his last moment, he momentarily thought about putting everything off and living life to the fullest as long as his disease allows. But he ultimately went through with it because the happiness he felt was only possible because he had decided to end it all. The cryonisation removed the arbitrariness of cancer. It removed the uncertainty of when death would arrive. It gave him hope, and it restored some level of order in his life. It gave him back control over his life. He further adds that the best part of living again was meeting Elizabeth and getting to know her. He then asks for her help, and she promptly agrees without knowing what he needs help with. Lo and behold, he reveals that he wants her to kill him. Mark wants for all his pain, suffering, and joy to finally mean something. As expected, Elizabeth is shocked and she refuses to help. Mark tells her that she's the only one he can turn to, and that she understands him better than anyone else. She sobs profusely and tries to walk away, but she can't and ultimately agrees to help him. In the next few days, Mark records his remaining memories for Elizabeth while also reliving it for the last time. Meanwhile, Elizabeth helps him find a poisonous drink. They hug and kiss before saying their final goodbye. Just before taking the drink, Mark's past flashes before his eyes. The last time, Naomi was by his side, and the two of them were dreading the moment until he finally took the drink. She was heartbroken to see the love of her life die in front of her eyes. She shut his eyes and intensely cried. Back to reality, Mark takes the drink once again. He then swiftly rushes to the cryonisation chamber and unlocks Naomi's pod. He places his head on her pod, slowly fading away in peace. But surprisingly, some moments later, Mark gains consciousness and finds himself surrounded by Dr. West and his team. Mark's worst fear has come true. Prodigy didn't let him die after having invested so much time and money on his reanimation. Dr. West expresses regret over their insolent behavior and promises to do their best to help him regain his will to live. Elizabeth is also noticeably missing from the room, implying that she has been dealt with for helping Mark. The movie ends with Mark losing consciousness.